Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. That's Robert Turbin. We've got a fun show for you as we're getting you set for Week 15. It's the fantasy playoffs. I know everybody's excited. If you're watching, I'm sure you're in the postseason. Otherwise, you just enjoy our entertainment, our conversation, and everything that we're going to have to offer for you for the next hour, which is going to be our usual of our running back roundtable. Start, bench, cut, answer your questions. So send them to us using the hashtag AskFFT on social media. And of course, we'll take you through the latest news as well as the roster trends of the moves you made on Tuesday night. But guys, like I said, it's the fantasy playoffs. So what do you look to do with your roster if there's any changes because of the fantasy postseason? Are you doing anything wacky? Are you just playing matchups? Are you just sticking with the guys that have gotten you here? Heath, I'll start with you. What's your approach to the fantasy playoffs if anything changes?
My approach stays pretty much the same. You try to not let the emotions or the pressure of the moment impact you all season long. I've mostly just started the guys that I have projected the highest, and I will continue to just start the guys that I have projected the highest. We're not going to do anything different. We'll trust what got us here.
Robert, what about you?
For me, Jamie, it's about patience for me. Like, I'm going to look at the waiver wire. I'm going to stick to my guns here as far as starters are concerned, but I'm going to look into the waiver wire because I'm a type of guy that I like to have depth. And so if I feel like I can add to my team and in case there's an injury during the playoffs and there's a guy out there in the waiver wire, I'm going to be looking hard at who's available so that I can upgrade my bench if possible.
All right, so we all participated in our Fantasy Football Today League. The top 6 teams made the playoffs, so unfortunately, Heath just missed out. He had a 4-game win streak to end the season, so he was coming for that 6th spot pretty hard there to challenge Adam Azer, who you know is on our show on Tuesday, certainly our Fantasy Football Today podcast host. You see the number 1 seed there, Jack Capitorto, one of our producers for CBS Sports HQ. But at number 2, there he is getting their first-round bye, the Rookie of the Year in our Fantasy Football Today League, Robert Turbin. I actually was closing pretty hard to catch him as well. I finished just out of the points lead. So my team was doing well at the end of the season, sputtered a little bit down the stretch there. But, Robert, obviously you got the best record in our league. What's been the best thing for you for that team this year?
Saquon Barkley with a little mix of Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, fellas. I was holding on by a pure thread at the start of the year. I didn't understand how I was winning games. Then you look at what Saquon Barkley was able to do this season. You look at what Lamar Jackson was able to do this season, and those two guys alone won me a lot of games. I think that the schedule had a lot to do to my benefit as well. And the other thing I think that was key, I drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. at the start, didn't really feel comfortable with that pick, and I ended up trading him for Mike Evans in Tampa Bay. Now, he had a hamstring for a little while, but it's boded well for me for the year. So I think, a couple strands of luck, a couple good moves, and there I am in second place.
And Heath, what about you? That 4-game win streak, did you think you had a chance to get in?
No. My season was pretty much sealed by the fact that 2 of my first 3 picks were Christian McCaffrey and Rashee Rice. It's really hard to overcome. I probably should have traded Christian McCaffrey a little bit earlier in the year. But, I fought hard to the end. I actually thought I knocked Adam out of the playoffs 2 weeks ago when I spent $20 of fab to go get the Dallas Cowboys, and they scored 20 points against his New York Giants on Thanksgiving. I thought I knocked him out, but then I played Will this week, and I did knock Will out and let Adam back into the playoffs. So you fight to the end. Don't draft guys that get hurt.
That's good advice. And listen, it's always fun to play spoiler, especially when you're playing against your friends. All right, so we'll update you guys throughout the playoffs on how that league finishes out. We'll see if Robert wins it or I can win it. But we'll try and hold strong for our portion of the show here on CBS Sports Network. But we got some news to get to here. There's a lot of items coming in Wednesday. I'll give you the updates after we talk about a few things here. But George Pickens not expected to play for the Steelers. So, Heath, when you look at the passing game here, taking on a really good Eagles defense, Russell Wilson's been great. Back-to-back games with over 20 fantasy points. Can you trust Russell Wilson? And is there anybody who steps up here in place of George Pickens taking on Philadelphia's defense?
I really hope that I do not need to start a Pittsburgh Steeler period against the Philadelphia Eagles. Their defense has been fantastic. I don't trust Calvin Austin, Mike Williams, had 16.7% target share. So did Scott Miller. That is terrible. I don't want to trust any of those guys. The one guy in the passing game maybe would be a Pat Freiermuth, but really his has just been touchdowns. The target volume hasn't been there. We don't have anyone on a bye. I don't really want to start him either. Najee Harris, probably the best start for the Steelers, but he's just a low-end number 2 running back. I am not sure the Steelers score more than one offensive touchdown in this game.
Robert, how do you view the backfield there for Pittsburgh? Because Najee has been involved in the passing game. We've also seen Jalen Warren obviously do a good job catching the ball in the backfield. And for what it's worth, for the last 5 weeks, the Eagles have been number 6 in most receptions allowed to running backs. A lot of that was the Austin Eckler game when he had 8 catches against them when Washington and Philadelphia met. But how do you feel about Harris and Warren in this matchup?
I feel really strong about the Steelers' backfield. Harris has had a good season so far this year, and it seems like he's getting better as the season has progressed. And Jalen Warren, he's just one play away from breaking the big. And so I feel like Najee Harris is more like an RB2 guy, Jalen Warren more like a flex, but I definitely feel comfortable if I have to start either one of those 2 backs this week.
Yeah, you would expect the Steelers to lean on those 2 guys given the situation with the receiving core. And again, Pickens has not been ruled out, but just considered unlikely to play, dealing with that grade 2 hamstring injury that caused him to miss the Week 14 game for Pittsburgh. So we'll see what happens the rest of the week in practice. Jonathon Brooks was placed on IR, suffering the second ACL tear in his right knee. He suffered the first one in his final year at college at Texas, and then just an unfortunate situation to see him going down, non-contact injury for the Panthers last week against Philadelphia. So, Robert, when you look at the situation there, just give your thoughts on the young man and what his future holds, second ACL tear in 2 years, and then just your thoughts on Chuba Hubbard now being the go-to guy once again for the Panthers. It looked like there may be a split backfield rest of season, but now Hubbard back in that featured role.
Yeah, the injuries suck, man. I faced a torn ACL in college and able to bounce back from that. But as a pro, back-to-back injuries, 2017, 2018, which essentially ended my career. And so he's a young football player, just getting started. So I think his future is still bright. I would encourage him to practice patience now that he's done this the second time on the same knee. So you don't rush to get back, even if you have to sit out an entire season before coming back again. That's the advice from running back to running back that I would give Jonathon Brooks. That's what I did when I was in college. I could have came back that next season. I chose to sit out, use my red shirt. That way I felt like myself coming back the following year, had a good season, and then ended up getting drafted. But I still think the future is bright for Jonathon Brooks. They just have to be patient with him. As far as Chuba Hubbard is concerned, he's the back for now and the back for the future, the near future at least, for the Carolina Panthers. He had a big-time season this year. He's proven that he can be consistent. He's proven that he can do all the things that are required to be a running back. And as a fantasy manager, you love what he was able to produce as well. I know some of us were trading him in hopes that Jonathon Brooks, or in thoughts that Jonathon Brooks is going to come back and maybe take some of those carries. So I still think the future is bright for Chuba Hubbard as well.
Keith, just in terms of the dynasty value for Jonathon Brooks, where are you at with him right now?
So he was pretty much a top 12 running back for me all season long. I thought he was the best running back in this class. But I think what Robert said was kind of a key. Like, he may not play next year. And so when you take that into account, you can't view him inside of the top 15 dynasty running backs. I'd have a hard time having him inside of the top 20, more of a low-end number 2. He is someone that is kind of hard to value for whether you're a contender or a rebuilder. Because if you're contending next year, you probably don't want to roster Jonathon Brooks. He's probably not going to help you. And as a rule, if you're rebuilding, if you're building for 2026 or beyond, you really kind of want to do that with quarterbacks and wide receivers and then figure your running backs out when you're ready to compete. So I do think this is a pretty massive hit to his dynasty value. But I agree also with Robert. Like, we get to 2026, I still believe in his talent as a running back.
All right, so hopefully we'll see what the Panthers look like by that point. Clearly the quarterback situation is still a little bit up in the air, although Bryce Young's played fantastic over the last month. Will the coach still be there? But hopefully the health for Jonathon Brooks will be there as well. A couple other news items before we preview Thursday Night Football. Colts getting healthy with Josh Downs practicing on Wednesday. Hopefully he's good to go in that matchup against the Broncos. The Bills getting a couple of guys back with Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman practicing on Wednesday. So Josh Allen getting more reinforcements. And the Giants are going to start Tommy DeVito at quarterback this week. Drew Lock is dealing with an injury, his walking boot. So DeVito will be the one taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Good luck to you, Tommy. Let's preview the Thursday night game between the Rams and the 49ers. These two teams met in week 3. It was a 27-24 Rams victory. And if you're recalling that game, there was no Deebo Samuel. There was no George Kittle, and Juwan Jennings went off. For this game, the big story is who's going to be in the backfield for the 49ers, because Isaac Guerendo hurt his foot in the win against the Bears in week 14. Did not practice as of Tuesday. We'll find out what his Wednesday status is and his game status is for Thursday. But if he's out, we got Patrick Taylor expected to start. So, Robert, give us your thoughts on the running back situations there for the 49ers, because no McCaffrey, no Mason, and now potentially no Guerendo.
Yeah, now that we're in the playoffs, I think running back depth is crucial. I think Patrick Taylor would be someone that I would look to add onto the roster, even if you're not planning on starting him this week in your playoff matchup. He's still good to have as a depth player, but I think he's going to be highly productive, similarly to what Guerendo gave us this past week. It just feels like any running back in that Kyle Shanahan running back system seems to be able to produce, especially if they have to only do it for a game or two. So Patrick Taylor, I think, a viable option for fantasy managers out there this week.
Keith, how do you feel about Brock Purdy? Because it's been a little bit of an up and down stretch for him. Had the shoulder injury, missed the game. Not a great game, clearly, in the snow. Bounces back last week against the Bears. Last time he played the Rams, he was a monster, and that was the Juwan Jennings game when he had 3 touchdowns. But again, there was no Samuel. There was no Kittle. They did have Brandon Ayuk at the time. Is Brock Purdy a number 1 quarterback for you on Thursday night?
He's very, very close. And I said this on our podcast this morning, but the difference between QB 8 in my projections and QB 20 in my projections this week is about 1.5 points. So if you're ranked 16th, you're not that much different than the guy ranked 9th. I think I've got Purdy around QB 13. I wouldn't be surprised if he lives right around that 20-point range. He does have significant upside, especially with the way that Jennings has been playing and the fact that George Kittle can score from just about anywhere on the field. I think what's going to be really interesting is Patrick Taylor going to be as good as Isaac Guerendo was, as good as Jordan Mason was? Because if this team struggles to run the ball just a little bit, then maybe we get more pass attempts from Brock Purdy, and then he has a chance to be a top 5 quarterback. He's a borderline starter for me. I do like him more than Matthew Stafford in this game.
Robert, just real quick before we wrap up the game, Deebo Samuel complaining about his role, wanting the targets. When you see a player talking like this, we always talk, in the fantasy world about the squeaky wheel. Do you think we're going to get an opportunity here for Deebo Samuel to get fed after a little bit of complaining on social media?
I think so. Sometimes, they say a closed mouth don't get fed. So I guess an open one does in this case. In many cases, you see the same thing with the Eagles and A.J. Brown. He'll get more opportunities, but I would tell Deebo Samuel simply get open.
That's true. He doesn't look like the same explosive Deebo Samuel, but maybe a few more opportunities in the backfield, given all the running back injuries there for the 49ers. All right, let's answer one of your questions here, and then we'll take a break. Got a lot more to cover on the show, so thank you again for sending us your questions. Here's the first one that we'll deal with for today. Fantasy Football Team Money wants to know, need 2 flex options in half PPR. Cortland Sutton, Tyreek Hill, David Montgomery, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper. Heath, which 2 are you playing in half PPR?
It is really difficult between those top 3, but I would actually go with Cortland Sutton and David Montgomery.
Robert, what about you?
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I agree 100% right there. Yep.
All right, we'll make it easy and go Sutton and David Montgomery. I can't believe we're sitting Tyreek Hill in the fantasy playoffs. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into the roster trends of the moves you made on Tuesday night, how will that impact the moves you're making on Wednesday night, and we'll give you a little bit of advice if you have a bye in the first round of the playoffs. That's next here on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. That's Robert Turbin. We're taking a look at the roster trends of the moves you made on CBSSports.com leagues on Tuesday night, and a lot of leagues run waivers on Wednesday. And as Robert told you, he likes to play the waiver wire for the fantasy playoffs. A lot of fantasy managers do as well, and there are a lot of great options that we told you to pick up heading into Week 15. Let's show you the most added list. And listen, we normally gloss over the defenses, but the DSTs, the kickers, could be very prominent options, especially that guy at number 5, Kyrie Fairbairn, who's been one of the best kickers, but was dropped, understandably so, going into his bye week. So we spent a little time talking about Patrick Taylor. Robert likes him this week as a potential starting option, given what the 49ers are looking like. Heath, why don't you give your take on Patrick Taylor? Can he be a starter for fantasy managers in this matchup against the Rams?
If Isaac Guerendo is out, then yes, he can be a starter. He could be a starter. And I would agree with what Robert said, that like historically what we've seen is next man up in the San Francisco backfield is a must-start fantasy running back. I do think Patrick Taylor, as a 26-year-old who's in his fourth year in the league and has one game with double-digit carries, now two maybe, after last week, and has averaged about 3.5 yards per carry, puts that theory to the test. I'm concerned that he won't be heavily involved in the passing game. So while last week I had Guerendo ranked as a top 12 running back, this week without Guerendo, I would rank Patrick Taylor as a high-end flex, not somebody I'd want to start as an RB2.
All right, so we have basically the fifth string running back for San Francisco, likely starting on Thursday night. We have the fourth string running back for the Raiders starting, potentially his third game in a row, in Sincere McCormick. Robert, what have you seen from Sincere? What a great name, by the way. What have you seen from him in the last two games? And he has a very interesting matchup this week against the Falcons.
Well, the one thing that's really noticeable, especially 2 games ago, is the Raiders are trusting him with the football. I mean, he's getting some of the workload there like a starting running back would, and I think he's produced, especially last game. And by the way, I had to start him last game after picking him up in waivers, and he did just fine for me, although it wasn't enough to make the playoffs in that particular league. But I think that he's been highly productive, and I like him in this spot. He's impressed the coaching staff. He's proven that he can carry the load and be a starter, and I think he's a good flex option for some fantasy managers this week in the playoffs if you have to use him.
Yeah, looking like a guy that's going to get 15-plus touches again. And we'll see what happens with Alexander Mattison, but Zamir White placed on injured reserve with that quad injury. Amir Abdullah only had 2 offensive touches in last week's game, so could be looking like a great situation for McCormick, who did a very nice job against the Chiefs 2 games ago and against the Bucs last week. Heath, another running back on this list was Isaiah Davis, and we got word today that Breece Hall still dealing with that knee injury, not looking like a lock to return, although the Jets were hopeful that he could return in Week 15. It's a great matchup against the Jaguars, but we also saw Braylon Allen basically split the workload evenly with Isaiah Davis. So which of the two do you like better, and would you consider starting either one?
I've got Isaiah Davis just a click higher, but these 4 running backs that we've talked about here, McCormick, Davis, Braylon Allen, Patrick Taylor, all within about 5 spots of each other in the running back rankings. I do like Isaiah Davis a little bit more in the passing game than I do Braylon Allen. I love this matchup for both of them. I think it's a situation where if things break right, they might both be top 20 running backs. So Davis just slightly over Allen, McCormick just slightly over Davis.
And we have a Jaguars run defense that is number 2 in most fantasy points allowed to opposing backfield. So it could be a good situation for both. Robert, you feel the same way? Allen or Davis if you had to choose one of the two?
Yeah, I like Davis. I like Davis a little bit more, particularly because, like he said, he can be more impactful in the passing game. But I do feel like Braylon Allen, has more impact as far as the red zone is concerned, which could equal touchdowns. And so I'd probably put Allen just a hair above Davis in this particular matchup.
I had them ranked back-to-back, so I think it's going to be another shared situation. Davis got the touchdown. That could be what sways one of these two guys being better than the other, but both have a great opportunity here if Breece Hall is out. Let's talk about the most dropped list here. And look, at this point in the season, you're moving on from players that are not going to be starters from you unless you're trying to handcuff your backup running backs or looking ahead to the upcoming weeks and moving on from some defense. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. You got guys that are on IR at this point with Jonathon Brooks. We covered that situation at the start of the show. Dallas Goedert's going to miss the rest of the fantasy playoffs. Hopefully he will return for the NFL playoffs for the Eagles. Unfortunately, Will Dissly's had a nice season helping fantasy managers. He's out for several weeks, so you can move on from almost all of these guys. Just keep an eye on some of the DSTs that are getting dropped. They may have some good matchups coming up down the road. Speaking of that, a lot of fantasy managers have earned a first-round bye, like our buddy Robert Turbin here. So you're looking ahead to Week 16, and you might be looking to stream quarterbacks, maybe stream tight ends, and obviously streaming DSTs because you don't need to worry about your lineup this week. You're looking ahead at the best matchups. You might need a quarterback, might need a tight end, and might need a defense to replace the starters that you've been using so far. So let's show you a list of the quarterbacks that have great Week 16 matchups. Again, this is 2 weeks from now, not for Week 15. You got Anthony Richardson against the Titans. We'll see how he does against the Broncos. Jameis Winston against the Bengals. That's as good a matchup as you will find. And Cooper Rush, if you want to trust him, taking on the Buccaneers. So Heath, of these 3 guys, do you trust them to be number 1 quarterbacks if you're in the fantasy semifinal?
Absolutely, if it's Jameis Winston. He has averaged 315 passing yards per game, 22 fantasy points per game since he became the starter, and had to play the Steelers in 2 of his last 3 games. He really probably is a 25 point per game guy. Absolutely love Jameis in this spot against a Bengals defense that has allowed 3 of the last 4 and 4 of the last 6 quarterbacks they've faced to score at least 27 fantasy points. If Jameis Winston doesn't completely fall on his face against the Chiefs this week, he might be a top 5 quarterback in my rankings next week.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So hold on to Jameis Winston if you picked him up, and pick him up if you're looking ahead to get a quarterback for that Week 16 matchup. Let's take a look at the tight ends that might be impactful for you in Week 16. And there are some guys that you might want to pick up for Week 15 as well. Jake Ferguson doesn't just get the Bucs in Week 16. He obviously gets the Panthers in Week 15. Dalton Schultz, same thing, gets the Dolphins in Week 15. They've been very bad against tight ends so far this season, and then gets the Chiefs in Week 16. And Juwan Johnson, we don't expect Derek Carr to be the quarterback there, but obviously he's been playing well, and we'll see whether it's Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler, if they can keep Juwan Johnson going, who's picked things up of late. So, Robert, of those 3 tight ends, do you have any faith in them to be starting in the semifinals if you need to use them in Week 16?
If I did, all 3 would be a reach, to be honest. But I'd go with Juwan Johnson. I'd lean towards Juwan Johnson. Even without Derek Carr, he just seems to be somewhat of a security blanket for all the quarterbacks for the New Orleans Saints. Once they get him going early and he gets his opportunities and he finds his way into the end zone. The other guys don't quite find their way into the end zone the way that Juwan Johnson does, in my opinion. So that's the guy I'm leaning towards out of those 3.
And look, it's a great call because the Saints receiving corps is clearly beat up. There is a chance that Chris Olave could return. He's eligible to come off IR for this week. But if you're Chris Olave looking at a team that's not in playoff contention, and doesn't have his quarterback, why would you risk getting another concussion based on what he's dealt with this season? And to your point, Jake Ferguson, no touchdown so far on the season. Dalton Schultz only has 1. It did come in his last game in Week 13 prior to Houston's bye week. All right, DSTs are very important. We know there's some great matchups. Basically, you're chasing who's playing the Giants. If you can find that matchup, the Ravens get them this week. And then it's the Falcons who gets them in Week 16. Rams get the Jets and the struggling Aaron Rodgers. Packers get the Saints with their most likely backup quarterback playing. And the Raiders get the Jaguars. That pass rush will be a little bit of a problem, most likely for Mac Jones if he's still the starter there. So, Heath, of these DSTs, are you looking ahead and picking up one of these options for that semifinal week?
Yeah, I think it'd be the Falcons. The interesting thing with Tommy DeVito starting is that he hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions, but he has one of the most insane sack rates of any quarterback that I've ever seen. Last year, his sack rate was north of 11%. This year, it's been over 11%, a 14% sack rate over the last 2 weeks. That's fantastic. Now, if your league is only about turnovers, then maybe you look to whoever's facing the Saints. But if you get points for sacks, I'll take the Falcons against Tommy DeVito.
And give the Falcons credit. They have 9 sacks in their last 2 games, so we'll see what they do in a great matchup this week as well against the Raiders. But obviously the Falcons could be great against the Giants. Offensive line is falling apart. Quarterback situation's not exactly great, and they're barely scoring points. So it could be a good situation for the Falcons DSD. Never thought that we would say that at the start of the season based on how that defense had performed, but clearly a great opportunity to chase the matchups, which you are when you're looking ahead to these Week 16 games. All right, let's answer one of your questions here before we take a break. And we got this one here from That There Is an RV from Cousin Eddie. All right, Tony Pollard or Juwan Jennings in the flex spot in PPR. Robert, which of the 2 guys do you like better?
Juwan Jennings, baby, all day.
Heath?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tony Pollard. I really like the fact that he's remained a workhorse 20-touch back, even with Tyjae Spears back. I'm going to stick with Pollard. He's a top 12 running back for me.
I would like to know who Cousin Eddie is benching because these 2 guys are going to be awesome this week. So start them both if you can, but in PPR, I might lean toward Jennings a little bit just because I think we could see a shootout between those 2 teams. And for what it's worth, I know the Bengals defense isn't good. When the Titans have been chasing points, so if the Bengals offense shows up, that's when Pollard's been a little bit tough to trust. So if the Bengals pull ahead early, we could see Pollard maybe not having the type of game that I think we're expecting him to have. But start them both if you can. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back. It's time for our running back roundtable. We'll talk about some topics around the running back position. Robert will give us his take. Heath will give us the fantasy spin, and we'll help you out with some of these questionable backfields. That's next here on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. So we like to take a spin around the running back room and see what's happening with certain backfields around the league. And then there are a lot of questions about certain players heading into the fantasy playoffs in Week 15, starting with the situation in New Orleans, where Alvin Kamara has obviously been one of the best running backs all season. He's put to bed any idea about maybe some people thinking he's too old. I don't know who would do that. But obviously he's having a fantastic season. However, he comes into Week 15 having not scored a touchdown since Week 6. He's most likely not going to have a starting quarterback in Derek Carr. He's taking on a very good Washington run defense that has been good for the most part against opposing backfields all season long. Robert, he does do well in the passing game, as we know, at least 4 catches in 10 games in a row. But given the environment that he's dealing with right now, without the quarterback, without scoring touchdowns, is Alvin Kamara safe heading into Week 15?
I think he is. I think he is safe. You know, he's the ultimate professional, and the Saints are going to be leaning on him still, even though their season hasn't gone the way that they hoped it would go this year, and obviously with Derek Carr being out. But you mentioned it, Jamie. You know, he may not be as productive on the ground as he has been earlier in the year, but in the passing game, he's going to be a viable option, and I think even more so with the backup quarterbacks, Jake Haener, particularly, you know, playing in this game. He's going to be a security blanket type player for the running back. A lot of check downs, a lot of swing routes, a lot of flat routes there to try to get him in space. And so I still think he's safe for the fantasy playoffs, and I need him to be safe because I got him on my roster.
Well, I think like all that talk about his role in the passing game really signifies the split. In a non-PPR league where catches aren't worth anything, he's a number 2 running back, and I do feel just a little bit queasy about him. In a full PPR league, though, I think he's going to catch 5 or 6 passes minimum. And so he remains a must-start number 1 running back for me in full PPR.
My only concern, aside from the touchdowns, because we saw Kendre Miller get a touchdown last week, is if they're getting blown out in this game, and Washington has shown they have that ability to blow out teams that are obviously inferior, could we see a lot more Kendre Miller? Could they pull back the reins on Alvin Kamara a little bit? You know, just knowing that they gave him the contract extension and the fact that he's done such wonderful things for them. I'm just a little queasy about him for this week. Clearly, you're not benching him, but you see, this is the lowest I've had Alvin Kamara ranked in a very long time, outside the top 12. So I do think even in PPR, where he's been a lot of times in this recent stretch without scoring touchdowns, around 12 PPR points per game, a lot of times around 15 points as well. If he hits that 12 number, he's more of a number 2 running back this week. So I'm just a little bit concerned about him taking on this Washington defense. Again, you're not sitting him, but might have some better options. Let's talk about the Seattle backfield, because last week we'll go to the Dallas backfield first. So, Robert, we've seen Rico Dowdle be fantastic the last 2 weeks and finally acting like a workhorse running back, which we've been waiting for all season long. So he's got back-to-back games with at least 112 rushing yards. Are we looking at Rico Dowdle now as a must-start running back heading into Week 15 against Carolina?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a bona fide RB2 back, you know, this week, and finally the Cowboys are giving him the opportunity to be, you know, RB1 for their football team. You know, he's had some sparks throughout the season, but finally finding some consistency. I think he's a starter this week.
I mean, he's definitely a starter. The problem with calling a guy like this a must start is that we haven't had that many running back injuries at the top. And so if you had 2 top 15 guys, then you might not be able to start Rico Dowdle. But definitely a top 20 guy, I think, is the highest I've had him ranked. And this Carolina defense, while it's been improved recently, still struggling a lot against the run. So it should be another good day for Dowdle.
I'll be honest, like, I struggle with Dowdle versus Kamara, you know, just based on, again, what the circumstances are, who the matchups are for both of these guys, what he's been able to accomplish the last couple of games. Now, granted, Dowdle only's got 1 touchdown in his last 2 games, while Alvin Kamara hasn't been finding the end zone. So in non-PPR, I would start Dowdle over Alvin Kamara. But just looking at the circumstances, I think that's how far Dowdle has come. And again, that's the concerns I have for Alvin Kamara heading into this Week 15 game. All right, let's talk about Seattle, where there are no concerns if Ken Walker is out. Zach Charbonnet was an absolute monster last week, over 35 PPR points with what he did, 193 total yards, 2 touchdowns, 7 catches. Robert, you're obviously familiar with the Seattle team. Ken Walker dealing with this calf injury. What's your assessment of the Seattle backfield if Walker does return? Do we see Walker step back into the lead role, or has Charbonnet done enough that he is now the guy that they may lean on, and maybe Walker is more of the supplementary option?
If Walker's back and he's, you know, 85%, he's going to play. He's going to start. He'll still be the number 1 back in the backfield for Seattle. But, you know, we could see a shift, and I think we will see a shift as far as the workload is concerned if Kenneth Walker III is back, because of the way Zach Charbonnet has played here since the bye week for Seattle. Really, he's going to get a good chunk of the carries now and take a little bit of the I think, load away from Kenneth Walker III. And so if you've got Charbonnet, I think he's a good flex option this week.
Yeah, we'd kind of gotten to the point to where he viewed Ken Walker as a must-start top 12 running back. And if he's back this week, he's not going to be there. He's going to be behind Alvin Kamara in full PPR. He might be behind Rico Dowdle. But for me, he still will be ahead of Zach Charbonnet. The real risk for Walker is that Zach Charbonnet is not taking a series here or there away from him, but that he's maybe taking away the short yardage work, that he's maybe taking away the passing game work. Those are two areas where Charbonnet has been better than Ken Walker. He's a little bit better at just going forward and getting 1 or 2 yards when you really need it, whereas Walker's the better home run hitter. I would still rank Walker ahead of Charbonnet. I agree with Robert that Charbonnet would be a good flex.
I just would like to see, and I think probably a lot of people would agree if you're in the Zach Charbonnet camp, and if you handcuff the two guys, let Ken Walker get healthy. They are right now in playoff contention. And let Zach Charbonnet go. 3 starts so far this season without Ken Walker, 17.9 PPR points or more in each of those games. So he's been a stud when Ken Walker has missed time. Let him play. Let Walker get healed up. All right, Robert, we got the situation in Kansas City where Isiah Pacheco is now going back for his 3rd game after coming back from the broken fibula, but he hasn't looked great in the first 2 games. This is an interesting matchup against the Cleveland run defense that allows a lot of rushing touchdowns. What we saw last week for him against the Chargers in terms of Pacheco, 16 total touches, including 2 catches. Is now the time for Pacheco to get going and for fantasy managers to trust him? Or do you think we need to wait at least 1 more week and see it happen before we can put him back in our lineups?
No, I think this week is a good opportunity. And Heath called this a long time ago. I mean, guys, he said, when guys are coming back from broken leg, they don't always look the same, especially right away when they get back. And so this is going to be a process for Isiah Pacheco, but I think this week is a good opportunity for things to open up for him.
Really interesting in Kansas City, not just since Pacheco came back. The first 10 weeks of the season, this team had a 45% rush rate, which is above average, right in the middle of the pack, but above average. The last 4 weeks of the season, they've got a 33.3% rush rate, the 4th lowest rush rate in the NFL. And that kind of coincides with some injuries they've had on the defensive side of the ball. They were really a very elite defense the first 10 weeks of the season. They have not been that the last month. The way Jameis Winston's been slinging the football around, I'm not sure the Chiefs are going to have the luxury to run the ball a lot against the Browns. I think Pacheco needs a touchdown. He is more of a flex than an RB2 for me this week.
Just a very fascinating game because you also have the revenge game factor for Kareem Hunt. Spent a lot of time in Cleveland as well, so we'll see if they give him the opportunity to fall into the end zone. But yes, it would be nice to see Isiah Pacheco score. I do think flex is the safest way to view him, but this could be the breakout game that we've been waiting for. All right, let's answer one of your questions here before we take a break. And again, we'll have a lot of your questions coming up at the end of the show, so keep them coming to us using the hashtag AskFFT. Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson Jr., or Bucky Irving, assuming that he plays. So Heath, which of this trio do you like the best?
It's Pollard for me, even if Bucky is back.
Robert?
I like Brian Robinson Jr. this week.
Brian Robinson Jr. is actually our start of the week for this week, so I like him slightly better than Tony Pollard, but I do like both. Bucky Irving would be great if he's back, but who knows how healthy that back injury is, and as we saw last week, unable to finish the game, so let's maybe give him some time to get healthy, and we lean on Rachaad White for fantasy managers relying on him. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back. It's everybody's favorite game, start, bench, cut. That's next on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Jamie, that's Robert, that's Heath. We're playing start, bench, cut. Who's in your lineup? Who's on your bench? Who are you kicking to the curb? Let's start with 3 quarterbacks here. We got Kyler Murray, Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield, 3 quarterbacks who have been hot at times this season. What are we going to do going into Week 15? Heath, you're up first. Murray, Darnold, Mayfield, start, bench, cut.
So this is one where the rankings have been moving around a lot this week, but as of right now, I am going to start Sam Darnold. I am going to bench Kyler Murray. I am going to cut Baker Mayfield, but all 3 of these quarterbacks inside of my top 12 this week.
You know me, Heath, and Jamie, I'm all about trust factor, okay? And there's no way that I'm going out there and trusting Kyler Murray to do anything on a consistent basis. All right, so give me Baker Mayfield as my starter, bench Sam Darnold, and I'm cutting Kyler Murray.
I think I got the same order as Heath. Darnold has been unbelievable, and he already beat up this Bears defense once in the last month. I do think Kyler has an opportunity here to get right for the fantasy playoffs because he gets the Patriots this week and the Panthers next week. So hopefully back-to-back games at home will help him. Baker Mayfield's been a little shaky lately without his guy there in Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans hasn't exactly elevated him. So I'm going to start Darnold, I'm going to sit Kyler, and I'm going to unfortunately cut Baker Mayfield. We got a trio of wide receivers here that have been up and down at times this season, speaking of Mike Evans. So we got Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, and Drake London. Robert, you're up first with this one. Who you starting? Who you benching? Who you cutting?
Yeah, this one is tough. I'm going to start Mike Evans just because I think he gets a lot of red zone shots into the end zone. On the bench, I'm going to put Drake London on the bench, and then I'm going to cut Tyreek Hill. I can't believe I'm doing that. It's a tough one.
Jamie loves to torture us with this game, Robert. I will start Drake London. I'm going to bench Tyreek Hill, and I will cut Mike Evans.
I mean, crazy, right? With 3 great options here. I'm going to actually start Tyreek Hill. I think we're seeing Tua Tagovailoa just playing at an unbelievable level the last month. And I think Tyreek is going to take on this really beat-up Texans defense. The secondary is not playing well, so I think Tyreek goes off once again. So he's my starter. I'm actually going to bench Drake London because I do think he's going to get going once again. Once Kirk Cousins starts throwing touchdowns, 4 straight games without a touchdown has really hurt Drake London's performance of late. And Mike Evans, I think we're starting to see a 31-year-old wide receiver show up. Got a little bit banged up in the game last week. Teams know that they're trying to force feed him the ball. That helps at times, but it hurts at others. So I'm unfortunately going to cut Mike Evans in this fictional game that we're playing. All right, got 3 more wide receivers here. Jordan Addison, Darnell Mooney, and DK Metcalf. Heath, you're up first for this one. Start, bench, cut. Addison, Mooney, Metcalf.
I will start Jordan Addison. He's actually been slightly better, I think, than Justin Jefferson over the last month. He was definitely better last week with 3 touchdowns. Looks like a must-start top 12 wide receiver to me. I will bench DK Metcalf. I still believe that we were going to get elite DK Metcalf at some point this season. It might even be this week. The targets have been back the last 2 weeks. The production just has not been. And as great as he's been, I'm going to have to cut Darnell Mooney in this situation.
Yeah, I'm going to start Jordan Addison as well. And, I expected DK Metcalf to have a breakout year this year, but I'm going to put him on the bench. And as much as I don't want to, I'm going to cut Darnell Mooney.
I was going to test you, Robert, because last time we had this, you cut DK Metcalf. We had a tweet from DK Metcalf, and he was calling you out, for it was a fake tweet, but fun nonetheless.
Yeah,
I'm actually going to start.
What's up with that?
I'm going to start Jordan Addison. I'm going to bench Darnell Mooney, and I'm going to cut DK Metcalf. I think he's dealing with a knee injury, a shoulder injury. It's been bothering him lately. Hasn't scored a touchdown since he came back from their bye week, which went into the bye week a little bit banged up. So just like the outlook a little bit better for Addison and Mooney right now. All right, last one here. We got 3 tight ends. We got Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, Evan Ingram. Robert, you're up first with this one. Which one you starting? Which one you benching? Which one you cutting?
Oh, Zach Ertz, baby. Give me the veteran. I know you don't like old guys, Jamie, okay? But Zach Ertz has been the man this season. I'm starting him. Mark Andrews, he's just one play away from getting into the end zone, making a great catch. He's on my bench, and I'm cutting Evan Ingram.
I am going to go ahead and start Mark Andrews. I will bench Zach Ertz. I will cut Evan Ingram. Ingram's a very frustrating player. He might have the most targets, but he's not doing anything with them, so I'll cut him.
Yep, we agree on the cut. I'm going to go with Robert's order as well. I think Zach Ertz is getting the job done. Jaden Daniels playing fantastic, and this has been his second option in the passing game, especially now that we know Noah Brown is not going to play for the Commanders heading into Week 15 against the Saints. Mark Andrews has been very up and down. But he is touchdown reliant, and he could score this week against the Giants. They can do whatever they want against the Giants. So Andrews will be on the bench, but unfortunately, Evan Ingram, he's got to go. All right, let's answer one of your questions here, and then it's all your questions rest of the way. So thank you again for sending them to us using the hashtag AskFFT. All right, 3 quarterbacks here. Anthony, it's really 2 quarterbacks. Nobody's playing Kirk Cousins. So it's Anthony Richardson or Bo Nix. Robert, which quarterback do you like better in
I'm
Week 15?
playing Kirk Cousins just because he said something. No, I'm going with Bo Nix all day.
I will go with Bo Nix if passing touchdowns are worth 6 points. I'm a little bit disturbed by the way that Bo Nix' rushing production has completely disappeared in the second half of the season. In a 4-point per pass touchdown league, I would start Anthony Richardson.
I'm going Richardson all the way. Riley Moss not going to play for the Broncos again, dealing with that knee injury. We saw 497 passing yards for Jameis Winston. I know Richardson's not going to do that. But he's been getting 6+ points per game in his last 3 with just his rushing totals alone. And getting Josh Downs back, I think, is huge for him. So I think Richardson has a high ceiling, and I think his floor is starting to rise a little bit. 25+ fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games. So give me Richardson slightly ahead of Bo Nix. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back again, it's all of your questions. Send them to us using the hashtag AskFFT. We'll help you with your fantasy playoff questions next on FFT. Last segment for us here on Fantasy Football Today, and it's all about you. Thank you for sending us your questions. Again, using the hashtag AskFFT. And here we go. Which one do I start in my flex for my first round playoff game? Adam Thielen or Jalen Waddle? Heath, which receiver do you like better?
Adam Thielen has 21 targets over his last 2 games. He's averaging more than 20 fantasy points per game in those games. I'm starting Adam Thielen.
Yeah, I'm going Thielen too, man. Thielen.
Waddle is heating up, but Thielen does get the Cowboys. I think that's the right way to go. Next question. Full PPR, James Cook or David Montgomery, both under the bright lights inside the dome as the feature matchup for the 4 o'clock slate of games. So potential Super Bowl preview here, Robert, between the Bills and the Lions. Which running back do you like better?
Wow, this is a tough one, but David Montgomery has been so consistent all year long. The Lions use both of those guys, Sonic and Knuckles, so well. I'm going with David Montgomery right here.
Yeah, the problem is that over the last month, James Cook's turned into into a knucklehead. Like sharing way too much with Ty Johnson. And so I think Montgomery has a better matchup. Montgomery has a more certain role. I'm going David Montgomery.
Montgomery's catching passes. He's had more catches than Jahmyr Gibbs lately. So outperforming Gibbs and certainly outperforming James Cook. So yes, I would go with David Montgomery as well. Next question. More James Cook. So here we go. James Cook or Rico Dowdle? Heath, which of the 2 running backs you like better here?
I am. Oh man, has it gone this bad for James Cook, or has it gone this good for Rico Dowdle? I think the answer to both questions is yes. I would go with Rico Dowdle.
Oh my goodness, Heath. I can't. I like Rico a lot. I'm gonna stick to James Cook on this option right here.
I think that's probably what most people end up doing, but one guy's taking on the Panthers and one guy's taking on the Lions. And while James Cook has certainly showed up in big games, just go back to the game in the snow against the 49ers, Rico's hot right now. So give me Rico Suave Dowdle. I think he's going to have an opportunity for one more big game here against the Panthers, and James Cook just makes me a little bit nervous, as Heath illustrated a little while ago. Next question. Start 2 of these 3. Tank Dell, Deebo Samuel, or Nico Collins. So start 1 of these 2. Tank Dell or Deebo Samuel. You're obviously starting Nico Collins. So half PPR, Robert. Who do you like better? Both Texans, or would you go with the Texan and Nico Collins and Deebo Samuel?
I don't typically like to start players on the same team. I'm going to go with Deebo here, especially since he's been vocal about wanting the ball. So I'll go Nico Collins and Deebo Samuel here.
I agree with that. I think we see a few more touches out of the backfield, hopefully a couple of targets out of the backfield. One of the big problems from Deebo Samuel, Robert said he needs to get open, and that's true, but it used to be that they'd throw him the ball at the line of scrimmage and let him do stuff afterwards. Now every one of his targets seems to be 10 to 15 yards downfield.
So here's the problem with starting both Texans. C.J. Stroud's got 5 touchdown passes and 5 interceptions in his last 6 games. He's not throwing touchdowns. So to count on multiple guys going off, that's just too difficult. Give me Nico Collins and Deebo Samuel. Next question. All right, half PPR, need 2 of these guys. Isiah Pacheco, Braylon Allen, let's assume Breece Hall is out. Calvin Ridley or James Cook. So, Heath, which of these 2 guys do you like the best?
So I'm definitely starting Calvin Ridley, and I'm definitely starting James Cook, and I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley over either one of the other running backs.
Ooh, this is a tough one. I'm actually going to go Pacheco and Braylon Allen in this particular situation.
Yeah, I'm going to go with James Cook and Ridley. I just hope that Ridley learns how to run routes the right way after watching tape the last week where he did not get a first down on what was an easy play. But we got some quarterback concerns there, so just keep an eye on what the status is for Will Levis dealing with the shoulder injury, and we'll see what happens there in terms of his health, and that could impact what happens to Ridley. But obviously, Braylon Allen contingent on the Breece Hall situation as well. All right, great job, guys. Hopefully we get you set for the fantasy playoffs. Remember, we're back here on Friday as well for your starts and sits and some props with Katie Mox. So thanks for watching, and make sure you check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast as well. You can download the QR code to make it easy for yourself. For Robert Turbin, Heath Cummings, I'm Jamie Eisenberg. Thanks for watching FFT.